When it comes to putting together a story for animation or for interactivity, it pays off to have a bit of pre-production work planning out what the story is going to be and identifying where the key moments in that animation happen. Based on what we just saw in the previous videos, we are going to be covering the basics of properties that we can change within any layer or any object in Adobe Animate. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to create me a new movie clip, and this anime movie is going to be the default that we've been using, 640 by 480, 30 FPS in ActionScript 3. And I am going to simply click create on that to create a stage. Then into this stage, I'm going to bring in one of the a couple of the files that we have from the movie that I have open here, which is kind of a web banner, and we are going to utilize some of those assets. So I'm going to go into the library, and from the library dropdown, you'll notice because I have both open, I have access to the previous library. So I'll go there, and I will probably grab the sun rays movie clip from there. And let's just work with this one for now. This should be sufficient to showcase what I want to showcase on properties. So now, what can we do with properties in our Animate? What kinds of properties can we change? Well, if I create animation for the layer, so let's go ahead and right click it and say I want motion tween for this. You'll notice that it expanded my layer to 1 second by default. It expands it to 1 second, and then it gives me the ability to do something to it to create keyframes, keyframe changes, right, whatever my time marker happens to be. So if my time marker is here, and I want to say I want to create keyframes for something, I can go ahead and say right click on that frame and go to insert keyframe, and these are the properties that I have access to via motion tween. So they include position, scale, skew, rotation, color, filter, and then I can create a keyframe for everything that includes everything that I just mentioned. So now, how does that work? Well, for position, it's fairly straightforward. All I got to do is with the layer tagged for a position change, for animation, all I need to do is just simply say if I want to apply a keyframe from here, I'll say insert keyframe, and then position. You will notice that it creates the little rhombus or the little diamond shape over here, and that's basically saying right now you have a keyframe there that you can animate. So if I move the sun to the right, I get my motion path, and my layer is animating between those two keyframes. That is an example of position change. How does it work for rotation? Let me go ahead and undo all the way till I get to where I started. Let me right click the keyframe, the frame again, and go, I want to create a keyframe for scale. Let's start with scale. So with scaling values, it's exactly the same. If I select the object or that's in that keyframe and then I shrink it, and what's going to happen is my animation is going to take place between the previous keyframe and this keyframe. So it basically does the way it works. And if I want to have any further keyframes past that point, all I have to do is keep on adding frames. So say if I want to expand this to here and then I want to increase it again, now my animation scales down and it scales up again to the last keyframe. So let me go ahead and undo those steps again and show you, go back to where I started. I want to show you a keyframe for the other ones. Skew, as the word says, it basically allows you to skew the shape of the object. So if you want to modify it, skew is sort of scaling, if you think about it, only it gives you more control over how the item is scaling. So that is how you would skew. Then let me click on that frame again, right click, insert keyframe. Rotation can be a little bit more difficult to understand, and it's a little bit more difficult to access. And the reason for that is because every time, as you have seen, I have set up the keyframe and then I have clicked on the actual object on the stage, on the movie clip or the graphic that I'm working on, and then I go in here and I can make changes either on position or I can change scale values. But I don't see by default over here the values for rotation. I see position, size, colors and effects, all that, filters, all the things that we saw a second ago when we right clicked here for properties. All of these properties seem to be available right here, except for rotation. To find rotation, you need to do it on the frame itself. And this is specific to motion tween, like I said before. So if I go to the frame, you'll see that you have the rotation option here. So say, for example, I want to rotate counterclockwise or clockwise. I'll select from the drop down, and on that second keyframe, I will automatically get a rotation value. So now my keyframes are set up for rotation. And just like with the other ones, if you keep on adding keyframes, you can keep on changing those values. So let me undo that really quick so that I go back to where I started. And I am going to do an alpha change. So for an alpha change, I want to go ahead and right click the frame, go to insert keyframe, and you'll notice that I don't see any alpha option here on the drop down. So how would I apply that? Well, under Animate, alpha is considered something that falls under color or filter. So let's go ahead and apply filter for now and see if that keyframe gives me anything. If I move my time marker, nothing happens there. I don't see anything changing. If I right click and I say color, nothing happens there either. So what's going on? How do I apply that filter? Well, with motion tweening, as you saw, anytime I make a change, I don't have to right click that the frame and go insert keyframe. The changes take effect depending on what I do to the object, except for rotation. So with that in mind, if I select the object at the end and then I go color effects, alpha, then I can control that alpha information. However, watch what happens. When I reduce it to 0, let it go, you probably noticed a second ago that the entire thing was selected. You need to be careful not to select the entire layer when you're doing this. You need to be on a specific frame before you start. That way you only change that instance of that frame for that particular movie clip. So there it is. The alpha information is created, and now you have two keyframes simply by placing your time marker where you need it, selecting the object on the stage, and then going under color and effects, alpha. You can also, as you see, change brightness, tint, and other filters that you can apply through here. You also have the ability to apply filters to this. So if you go under filters, you have the ability to add filters just as you would in Photoshop. Not as advanced as Photoshop, but you get something that can get you out of a jam. Things such as drop shadows mostly are things that we use constantly, or glows. So you have access to that. Motion blurs allow you to fake blurring on the screen. So that's also a good one to know. So this is just a short walkthrough on how to affect the properties of objects when you're doing timeline animations directly, on objects on the timeline. Basically making sure that you understand that you have control of those things by adding keyframes. Now let's, for example, talk about motion tweening, regular motion tweening. How does that work for motion tweening? Well, let me go ahead and turn off the visibility on this layer. Let me create a new layer and bring in an instance of that sun again onto that new layer. Now in this case, I want to activate regular, the old type of motion tweening, classic tweening. So there it is. And on the second one, I am going to create a keyframe for this, say right there. And I want to have some kind of motion, not just by moving it up like that. You notice that if I place my time marker here on my last keyframe and I move it, basically I modified the animation already, the position of that layer. So it's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. Then say, for example, I want to apply on top of this, and by the way, you notice that I didn't right click this time and said insert keyframe of any kind or anything like that. That is available only for regular motion tweening. Okay. For classic tweening, you basically need to work directly between the object and the properties of whatever you're working on. So in this case, I simply moved the thing, and that created my animation for the motion for that movie clip or graphic. Then say, for example, I want to apply a change in alpha on this, then I need to go to the object itself, go to color effects, alpha. So you will notice that it's not as different as the other one was. The only difference is whether I want to apply a keyframe by right clicking on the frame itself, or or like I said with motion tween, you don't have to right click to apply the keyframe, but it gives you control over what items, what properties you want to animate within a layer. So that's basically how you would work also. From that point on, everything is very similar between classic tweening and motion tweening in terms of how to affect properties.